to the Think and Nick podcast. I'm your host, as always, Nick Daniels, and I'm joined by Nicola. Nicola, how are you?
Very well, thanks, Nick.
Good.
to see
Happy
you.
New Year. Yes, you too. It's been 2 weeks now since we've actually done a podcast because of the new year. So we thought that we would kick off the new year with a podcast about goals and goal setting.
Brilliant.
So now when let's first discuss, what is a goal for those that don't know. It's not a goal that you would experience in a football match or a basketball match. It's actually a goal that you would set yourself and you would try to attain that goal or achieve that goal. So Nicola, how do you define goal setting?
I think you've probably just defined it. It's basically identifying a future state, a desired state, an achievement, an acquisition, and moving from where you are now towards that, so that state becomes the reality in your life. So that might be buying a car, getting a house, getting a promotion, studying, learning to fly. All these different things can be goals, and they can be long-term goals and they can be short-term goals.
Yeah. So now you've got a piece of paper and a pen, you've got a notebook in front of you, and you want to set yourself these goals. What do you think are the sort of questions you should be asking yourself when you are goal setting?
It's a good one. It's a great question because we often talk about SMART goals being specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely or time dimensioned. But I'll come back to SMART further into the podcast. Before we get into the goals, I want to talk about values.
Okay.
Because often we'll have a great goal, or we think we have a goal, but actually the goals that are aligned to our values are usually the ones we're most likely to achieve. And values are basically our belief systems and things that we perceive to be important. So, for example, if I've got a value of family and connectedness, but my goal is to fly around the world single-handedly, I might find that I can't achieve my goal because every time I move towards it, it takes me away from my family. So sometimes when you do goal setting, it's important to understand your values because goals that are aligned to your values are much more likely to be achieved, and you get a much heightened sense of satisfaction. So setting the goal is important, but knowing what's important to you is equally important.
It's so funny that you say that because obviously I went off and jet-setted and, traveled around the world and in Vietnam. And now I found myself doing a 360, wanting to be closer to my family. I'm leaving Vietnam in a couple of months. And I've just done a full circle. And obviously my goals at the time when I was 23 was to jet set, but actually as time has gone by, it's not aligned with my values because obviously family for me is a big part of that. So let's jump into SMART goals as we were talking about earlier. Specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. Do you want to just jump into each one of those different categories?
Sure. So interestingly, goal setting was this was the pivot point in my personal career. This is what got me into the industry that I'm in. And I was sitting in a training room in a hotel, and we went through this entire goal setting process. So when you get this, it can actually change your life quite substantially. So if you go through that, it's values, goals, actions. So the first step is saying, who am I and what is important to me? Then you set your goals, and then you determine what it is you're going to do. So think of it as a pyramid, values at the bottom, goals in the middle, actions at the top. So let's focus on the goal piece. So the SMART acronym has been around for donkey's years. And let's go through each one of the steps. Specific means that is the goal you're setting something you can understand? Can you get your mind around it? So the body moves towards what the mind sees. So if you define a goal and you can't imagine it and it's not tangible, the chances are you can never get your body to move towards the goal. The action piece becomes incredibly hard because you're never quite sure what you're going to do. And sometimes companies get this wrong too. We set big goals in companies and then we discover that people aren't achieving them. And the reason they're not achieving them is because they don't understand the goal. It's like, improve leadership. Well, what does that mean? So improve leadership to me might be different to improve leadership to you. So getting specific is really about putting the right words together so that if anybody heard that sentence, they would understand what you were trying to do.
Yeah. And then jumping on to the next one, the goals need to be specific, as you've mentioned. They also need to be measurable, which means that you need to be able to measure the goal. So, for example, you want to lose 4 kgs. Do you want to lose 4 kgs in 1 month? Do you want to lose 4 kgs in, wait, that's timely, right? That's T, isn't it?
You see. Well, keep going.
Yeah. Let me start again. I jumped the gun. Shit.
So often when we talk about strategy, I talk about sailing. And if you sail from A to B, in sailing terms, there's always a longitude and a latitude from where you start and where you end up. So if you move from one position to another, there's a measure. And the measurement is longitude and latitude when you're sailing. In business, that measure might be return on capital, or return on investment, or return on equity, or revenue, or something like that. But there's a measure. So the measurement is nothing more than the ability for you to track your progress between A and B. So if the measure is kilograms, just using your example, I'd rather pick the number 8 than 4 right now. But if the measure is kilograms, what you're doing is I can measure on a fairly frequent or regular basis, am I making progress towards my goal? So if it's 4 kilograms, I can weigh myself and I've lost half a kilogram. I can weigh myself and I've lost 1 kilogram. I can weigh myself, I've put on half a kilogram. So I've gone backwards slightly. So I can now track, am I moving towards that goal? So a measurement is basically a metric of progress. Think of it like that.
Yeah. And then A would be for attainable or achievable. And that would be, work towards a goal that is challenging but possible. Try to take over the world in one night. That's not going to happen. Do you know what I mean? You need to work to something that is within your means, and you will be able to achieve. But obviously something challenging is a lot better than something easy. Otherwise, you're not going to get much satisfaction from reaching that goal. And then the next one would be realistic. The goal has to be realistic. I mean, if you think about it, what if I say I want to be a billionaire by the end of the year? That's not a realistic goal. You know what I mean? I'm never actually going to be a billionaire unless I don't know, land on a Bitcoin or something, on a Bitcoin mine. You know what I mean? Realistically, that's not possible. So the realistic part would be set yourself a goal that's realistic, that can also be attainable. And then T for time bound is obviously what I mentioned earlier. That would be give it a time frame. So since we're speaking about weights and kgs, I want to lose 6 kgs in 4 weeks. Give it a time frame so that when you get to 4 weeks, it gives you that motivation to reach that goal within that time.
Right.
So we've spoken about goals and we've spoken about, S.M.A.R.T, which has been used, as you said, for donkey's years. Let's look at the benefits, Nicola, of goal setting.
Okay. All right. So they always say, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So once you've figured out the goal, the important part isn't the goal. It's what are you going to do to achieve it? It's the action piece. So once you move into action, which I've always sort of thought as the top of the pyramid, it's the thing that's going to drive you forward. The actions are really a whole set of activities. And when you're planning your actions, you might write down every single activity and only put them in order afterwards. Often people try and be very sequential to begin with, but actually just put everything down and then figure out what order it goes in. So the benefit of that is you take those actions and you put them into your daily plan. So what that daily plan does is it helps you put some structure around your day-to-day activities. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And it allows you to feel a sense of achievement. So have you ever been through a day? I've got, I keep going back to paper diaries, to be honest, and I don't know if that's an age thing, but I just find it so much more rewarding to tick something off on a list than I do to like press done on my phone or on a iPad screen. So have you ever been through a day where you've had a list of things to do and you get that feeling of ticking them off?
And you get all of them done, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a
So
great feeling.
sometimes you get them. Yeah, it's a fantastic feeling. So what that does is it releases something called an endorphin. So you get a mental high when you tick something off. So there are massive psychological benefits, health benefits to you planning your day and achieving things on a day-to-day basis. So the other, I mean, that's just the benefit of getting organized around your goals. The benefit of goal setting in general is they say if you're not growing, you're dying. So if you've got some goals in your life, I know there's this sort of curve in life where you sort of peak and then you're on a downward slope. It's very hard to sigmoid curve your life. But what you can do is keep reinventing yourself on an ongoing basis. And if you keep doing that, you keep having that sense of growth, achievement, contribution, impact. And so life becomes a continuous process of contributing.
Yeah.
And there are times when, maybe you just don't want any goals because you spent your whole life setting goals, and you can take a gap. But when you take a gap, you'll probably find that you'll be searching for something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, something I've learned in my life for sure, and I found it quite effective, is rather than just set yourself a goal and then achieve it, just like what you've been saying, because a lot of people set themselves a goal, then they achieve it, and then they're like, well, now what? You know what I mean? But like you were saying, it's better to reinvent yourself and continue to plan. It's almost like small wins. Like every single day, you set yourself a list of things to do, and these are the small wins on the path to achieving, the big goal at the end.
Yeah. Yeah. So sometimes they call it incremental gains.
Yeah,
And,
exactly.
Yeah. And a long time ago, I read a book called The Handbook for the Positive Revolution. Needless to say, it was a de Bono book, but he used the analogy of a hand to talk about how you could turn around societies. And he spoke about the index finger being direction, but he spoke about the little finger being contribution. And he said in that book, no matter how small the contribution, it's always important to make one, because small contributions add up to big effects.
Yeah.
So if you think about goal setting and bringing those goals into your day-to-day plans and having the discipline to actually follow your plan, it's the small contributions that add up to a big effect.
Yeah. For a good example for that, in the space that I'm in right now, YouTube, for example, you start a YouTube channel, and you it's really, really difficult to get subscribers when you're starting, like really, really difficult. But as they grow, your audience grows, more people hear about you, and eventually it just becomes a free flowing, people are just subscribing because you're so well known. It's almost like a snowball effect.
Yeah.
Now, Nicola, I'm guilty for this. And I'm sure you are, and I'm sure every single person that we know is guilty for this. And maybe, there's obviously maybe the 1% isn't, but why is it so hard for people to stick to goals? Because I know I'm guilty for this. I'll set myself a goal, and like if it's like a long-term goal, sometimes I just wane off the path, and then maybe I'll come back on, and then wane off again. So why do you think it's so difficult for people to stick to their goals?
So I think you've got to ask yourself, how much do you want it? So there's a difference between dreaming and goal setting. And you're right, I am guilty of this. I've been asked to, and I've promised myself to write and publish something for years, and I don't. It's not that I don't write, I don't publish. I've got a lot of stuff written. So it's like, what's stopping me from actually doing what I believe I want to do and what other people have asked me to do? Why do I not do it? So I think fear of success and failure are parallel paths. So sometimes we sabotage ourselves because success can be as scary as failure. So let's say I publish, for example. Now what's going to happen? If it's a bestseller, I'm like, oh, now I've got all these people to deal with.
Oh, no. Fame. Oh, no. Fame and fortune.
That's kind of a frightening thought because
Yeah.
on the one hand, it sounds wonderful. On the other hand, who wants to be Prince Harry? It's
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
So there is that fear of success. People are afraid of what winning might look like, but people are also afraid of failure. People are afraid of rejection. People are afraid of being judged. People are afraid of saying, I want this and not actually getting this. And maybe it's better to say that I don't want it, so then I can't be seen as a failure. But actually, I think life is far more rewarding. And I'm almost reminding myself as I'm talking to you that if you do set goals and you have the discipline. So someone very close to me has buckets of self-discipline, bucket loads of self-discipline, almost to their detriment at times.
Really?
So the self-discipline, the rigor, like an athlete. I was watching a presentation a couple of weeks ago, and the speaker was talking about incremental gains, but also how the athlete is the person who gets up and still goes to the gym at 4 o'clock in the morning to train for 2 hours, to get 2 seconds off their time.
Yeah.
And for so many people, 2 seconds off their time is not a big enough return. So I think sometimes why we don't get our goals achieved is we don't feel a big enough return soon enough.
Yeah, I just want to jump in there. Something that goes hand in hand with that is a word that pops to my mind is consistency. And I think there are a discipline. Consistency would be a result of discipline. I think you need discipline and consistency if you do want to achieve your goals. Like, for example, the example you just mentioned with people who get up early just for that extra 2 seconds.
Yeah.
I think that's what makes them just that much better. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. And it's often the exclusion of something or someone else. And so often a goal is not achieved in isolation. So people can set goals, but there's almost always a support crew. You don't often find somebody that's said, I'm going from here to there. They've been supported. So I met someone recently that backpacked from Australia to the UK on her own.
Wow, okay.
An incredible young lady. What's interesting is that's a solo journey, but I can almost guarantee you that if we mapped her journey, there would have been a lot of people on the way that provided some level of support.
Absolutely.
So when you set a goal, it's really useful to have an accountability buddy, or make sure you've got the right support structures in place so that when you are being away from certain environments, when you're going to gym at 4 o'clock in the morning to do the extra 2 seconds or whatever it is your sport is, then there's a support system in place. And one of the things that came up in this presentation that I listened to was just how a sense of community was so significant for many of the top athletes. He was actually talking about runners in Kenya. So find someone who can hold you accountable, like a coach. Great people have great coaches. Yeah.
Exactly. Top boxers in the world, top MMA fighter, they all have a team. Do you know what I mean? Top athletes, they all have a team.
Yeah.
And another word that comes to mind when I think about that is sacrifice. I feel like if you want to achieve your goals, you've got to make some sort of, sacrifice along the way.
Yeah.
So if we kind of tie that in with the next question, what strategies do you think we can apply to help you stick to your goals?
So one would very definitely be a support system or person, a coach.
Yeah, for sure.
Someone who can help you stay on your path. The other is, I think, structure. Bring some structure into your day. So put those actions into your plan. I think accountability is big. So somebody who can hold you accountable. So if I make a commitment to you, you can now hold me accountable. So if I said to you, I'm going to write, and I'm going to write 500 words a day, I could write 500 words a day, or I might not. So who's actually going to measure me against my words? So there's a point at which we are measuring ourselves, which is the self-discipline, the accountability to self. But there's a huge amount of value in having someone else keep you on track. It's like, just a text message. Have you written your words today?
Yeah.
It's like this podcast series. You've got me getting up on Saturday mornings when I should be resting.
Yeah, you secretly love it. You secretly love it.
Yeah, I love it. But it's because I always get to see you. But it's like
That's
there's a
nice.
sense of accountability, and I have to be available.
Yeah.
There's a relationship, there's a history, there's a sense of obligation. So I think if people feel obliged to do it with their accountability buddy, then you will more likely do it.
Yeah.
And then when you do, you're just so glad that you did, because you get to do
Yeah.
that endorphin tick, which is awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And just going back, touching on sacrifice, I mentioned sacrifice, the word there. I mean, to give an example of that would be like, I'm going to go back to the weight gain again. If you want to lose weight, you've got to get on a good diet. You've got to sacrifice all those cookies, all those chocolates, all those biscuits, all those sodas, all those desserts. You know what I mean?
All that red wine.
All that red wine. Exactly. So let's sort of shift the focus now, Nicola, to, and this will be the last question that I'll pose to you today, but to businesses.
Yep.
And team goals. So in a sort of business environment or a team environment, how would you go about setting goals for a team?
That's also a great question. Is because in businesses, what we tend to do is we tend to reward individual performance. So what we've got is, let's say we've got a team of 5 or 10 people. The chances are an organization has got something called a performance management system. So they set up what we call KPIs and KPAs. KPAs are key performance areas, and KPIs are key performance indicators. So typically you'd set a goal and you'd say, that's a bit like an area. And then what are the indicators that would imply that we've moved towards that goal? And they use smart goal setting as well. But in businesses, we tend to reward individual performance. So what that means is it makes us highly competitive, and we're in pursuit of a goal because we get rewarded. I get the benefit. So something companies are starting to understand more is the value of a team goal, where yes, you can reward individual performance. You went above and beyond the course of duty to help achieve a particular result, but the whole team has to get there. The whole team has to get there. And the tragedy of competitive behavior in business, there's a benefit to this, which is considerable. But one of the tragedies is that if we're highly competitive, unless you can harness the competitiveness of the team, like in soccer, you might find yourself having everyone run off in their own direction because the individual performance is rewarded, not the team performance. So imagine if every soccer player got a bonus because of how they performed, not because of the team scoring a goal.
Yeah.
I'd like to see that match.
I remember you saying in one of our previous podcasts, I think it was Six Thinking Hats, maybe Leadership with Alex, was you were saying that I think it was with Leadership with Alex, actually.
Okay.
When you can, because we're talking about teams and performance and stuff like that. And I remember you saying that if you can get the team and give them a picture of the end destination, the journey to get there will be a lot more fluid, and a lot better, a lot easier, and it'll probably the goal will get achieved in the end.
Yep. So I had a message yesterday from a client. I asked her how her year was going and how sort of the holiday season went in terms of turnover and performance, and they're doing incredibly well. And she's been asked to present back to her board on what helped them succeed. And I think there are a number of ingredients in success, but without question, getting the team's minds around what is possible was one of the key factors. Could you turn this business around? Is it achievable? Go back to S.M.A.R.T. Is it achievable? And the minute you think you can achieve it, you're more likely to move towards it. So when you're setting goals as a team, and I've said this probably, I can't remember which podcast it is, don't underestimate the importance of spending time imagining the outcome. Just imagine the result. So if you wanted to, if we went back to the writing thing, until I imagine the result, the book, published, signing, and all those things, I can even feel my mind moving away from it as I start to talk about it. But until you imagine the result, the rest doesn't really follow naturally. It's like athletes, they don't imagine the start, they imagine the finish.
Yeah. Well, there you have it.
There you have it.
It's funny. I'm so glad we had this conversation because this is, I know, shameful, but I've been really busy over the last week. There's a lot going on. I still haven't set my New Year's goals, and I was actually going to sit down today, this weekend, and write them down on a piece of paper and really give them some thought. So, Nicola, thank you very much for today's podcast. We appreciate your time as always, and you have a fantastic weekend.
Thanks, Nick.
Okay,
Take care.
Cheers.
All right. Bye.
For more news and content about Think and Nick, go to www.thinkandnick.com or visit our Facebook or Instagram pages @Think and Nick.